the podcast that explores the darkest corners of human nature and the stories that shock communities. Today's episode takes us to Clearwater, Minnesota, where a jealous mother brutally beat her teenage daughter to death after discovering she had been sleeping with her stepfather. Ava Simmons was an 18-year-old senior at Clearwater High School in Minnesota. She worked part-time at the local Walmart. Despite being known as a quiet, thoughtful girl, Ava's life was far from simple. Behind the scenes, she had a turbulent home life, largely due to her strained relationship with her mother, Sara Simmons. Ava and Clara's relationship had always been difficult, but in recent years, it had worsened. Clara, who struggled with alcoholism and emotional instability, often clashed with her daughter. Jealousy seemed to be at the heart of their issues. Clara saw Ava's youth and attractiveness as a threat. Ava, a slender and attractive teenager, had started getting attention from boys at school, and her mother didn't handle it well. Clara, whose beauty was drained by years of alcoholism and drug use, was insecure about her looks and felt that her daughter's growing independence and beauty were taking something away from her. The tension between them escalated when Ava began secretly sleeping with Clara's husband, Matthew Simmons. Matthew, a 36-year-old construction worker, had been in a relationship with Clara for 5 years. He was rough around the edges, and his reputation wasn't the best. He had been involved in several domestic disputes, even being arrested for an altercation with Clara inside the Walmart where Ava worked. Over time, however, Matthew's relationship with Ava quickly grew inappropriate. The two began an affair, which Clara didn't immediately know about. But Ava's guilt and anxiety over the secret made the home environment even more tense. Ava's dreams reflected her desire to escape the chaos of her home life. She had been planning to move out after graduation, hoping to attend a community college and later transfer to the University of Arizona in Tucson, where her grandparents lived. She talked about her dreams of leaving Minnesota with friends, spending hours scrolling through Instagram, watching Netflix, and fantasizing about a future where she could leave her troubled home behind. However, the days leading up to her death were anything but hopeful. Ava found herself caught between the suffocating jealousy of her mother and the secret sexual relationship with Matthew. The tension in her house was unbearable, and while Ava continued to plan her escape, she may have sensed that her time was running out. It was the morning of March 28, 2017, when Ava Simmons' body was discovered. The storm that hit Clearwater, Minnesota, the night before had left the streets covered in snow with temperatures well below freezing. Around 8 a.m., a maintenance worker from Clearwater High School, identified as Richard Granville, was doing his usual rounds when he noticed something unusual in the parking lot. At first, he thought it was a pile of snow pushed up by a plow, but as he got closer, he saw the horrifying truth. Ava's lifeless body lying partially covered in snow without any clothing. Shocked, Granville immediately called 911, reporting what he had found. The cold, windswept parking lot provided a grim backdrop to the discovery. Ava's body showed clear signs of physical trauma. Her skin was bruised and there were scratches on her face and arms. Granville was visibly shaken, telling the police dispatcher that it looked like she had been left outside for hours. The blizzard had nearly buried her, and it was clear to him that she hadn't survived the brutal overnight conditions. After the call, Granville waited for the police to arrive. He stayed calm, though witnesses said he looked pale and nervous as he stood by the school entrance away from the body. The freezing temperatures had preserved the body to some extent, but Ava's cause of death wasn't immediately obvious. Given the weather and her injuries, it was clear that something far more sinister than hypothermia was at play. When the police arrived minutes later, they quickly cordoned off the area and began their investigation. The officers noted that Ava's body showed clear signs of physical assault, with multiple bruises and injuries evident on her skin. The frigid temperatures and heavy snowfall were also significant factors, leading the authorities to suspect that Ava had been left there intentionally. The official cause of death would later be ruled as hypothermia, but the circumstances surrounding her death raised immediate suspicions of foul play. Investigators began to piece together the events that led to this horrific discovery, seeking answers about what had happened to Ava in the hours leading up to her death. The shocking nature of the crime sent ripples through the community, leaving friends and family devastated and searching for explanations. In the aftermath of this tragedy, the Clearwater police arrived at the scene within minutes of the 911 call on March 28, 2017. Detective Marla Soren, a 15-year veteran known for her thoroughness, led the investigation. The snow-covered parking lot presented a grim scene. Ava Simmons's body was quickly identified by the personal items found near her, including her phone, which had fallen out of her bag. Her frozen body showed visible signs of trauma. Her face and arms were bruised, and there were clear indications that she had been beaten before being dumped outside. Detective Soren and her team immediately suspected foul play. While the blizzard had likely accelerated her death, the bruises suggested Ava had been attacked before being left in the cold. The medical examiner later confirmed that the official cause of death was hypothermia, but she had been unconscious when she was left in the snow, unable to save herself. Her injuries, particularly the blunt force trauma to her head, suggested she had been beaten severely, likely rendering her unconscious before being dragged into the elements. The police believed Ava had been killed elsewhere and then dumped in the high school parking lot. There were no signs of a struggle in the snow around her body, which led investigators to conclude she had been moved post-assault. The killer had likely used the blizzard to cover their tracks, hoping that the snow would hide the evidence. However, detectives were able to piece together the sequence of events based on the lack of blood at the scene and the pattern of the bruises on her body. Using thermal imaging equipment, detectives scanned the area for footprints and other clues, but the heavy snowfall had erased most traces. The investigators collected any possible evidence, including tire tracks that were still faintly visible near where her body was found. With the scene secured, the police turned their attention to potential suspects, knowing that whoever had done this had taken advantage of one of the worst snowstorms of the year to hide their crime. Ava Simmons, 36, was the first person investigators turned their attention to. Known for his volatile temper and violent history, Matthew had been dating Ava's mother, Clara, for 5 years. A construction worker with a rough reputation around Clearwater, he had been involved in several domestic disputes over the years. His relationship with Clara had been anything but peaceful. Police records showed multiple incidents of physical altercations between the two, often fueled by alcohol and Matthew's controlling nature. One of the most notorious incidents occurred just months before Ava's death, in the very store where she worked. In late 2016, Matthew had flown into a rage inside the Walmart grocery store, where Ava was a part-time cashier. Witnesses described seeing him drag Clara by the arm down one of the aisles, eventually whipping her with his belt in front of stunned shoppers. The outburst had been triggered by a small argument over groceries, but it quickly escalated into a public display of Matthew's violent tendencies. Clara had refused to press charges after the incident, citing her dependence on him both financially and emotionally. This incident stood out to detectives as they dug deeper into Matthew's background, painting a picture of a man who was used to controlling the women in his life through fear and aggression. When Matthew was brought in for questioning following Ava's murder, his behavior was detached and cold. He showed little concern for Ava's death, and it wasn't long before detectives uncovered an even darker secret. Matthew admitted that his relationship with Ava had turned sexual in recent months, although he refused to elaborate on how it started or the nature of their relationship. The revelation added a disturbing layer to the case. The police now had a motive. Matthew had become intimately involved with his girlfriend's daughter, and the tension within the household had been growing. Ava's friends later revealed that she had confided in them about her mother's increasing jealousy. This revelation raised the stakes in the investigation. Although Matthew didn't show signs of guilt during his interrogation, his violent history and disturbing relationship with Ava made him a prime suspect. However, his calm and seemingly emotionless responses during questioning kept investigators from jumping to conclusions too soon. Ava Simmons, 40, had long struggled with alcoholism and emotional instability. Her dependency on alcohol, combined with her inability to hold a steady job, had left her vulnerable and reliant on Matthew for both financial support and a steady supply of booze. Over the years, Clara's emotional state had deteriorated, and many of her neighbors described her as erratic, often swinging between moments of calm and sudden outbursts. While she occasionally worked odd jobs, she was largely unemployed, and Matthew's income as a construction worker was her main lifeline. This created a toxic dynamic in their relationship, with Clara feeling trapped by her dependence on him. Clara's struggles with her self-worth were only compounded by the jealousy she harbored toward her daughter. Ava, at 18, was everything Clara felt she no longer could be. Young, attractive, and with her whole life ahead of her. As Ava grew older and blossomed, Clara's insecurities deepened. Friends and family noted that Clara would often make passive-aggressive remarks about Ava's appearance, suggesting that she felt overshadowed by her own daughter. This jealousy only intensified when Clara discovered that Ava had entered into a sexual relationship with Matthew. The knowledge that her daughter, the very person she had raised, had become involved with her husband, pushed Clara's emotional instability to its limits. The fact that Ava, The person she had always felt envious of was now having sex with Matthew was something Clara couldn't accept. When police brought Clara in for questioning after Ava's death, she appeared disheveled and agitated, a far cry from the calm, cooperative demeanor she had displayed when officers first arrived at the crime scene. Her story seemed inconsistent, and she often rambled about her own troubles with Matthew, blaming him for her unhappiness and the fights that often broke out between them. Investigators noted that Clara was highly emotional, but whether this stemmed from genuine grief or a deeper, more dangerous turmoil was unclear. During interrogation, Clara admitted that she had been aware of the growing closeness between Matthew and Ava, though she downplayed the significance of their relationship. However, detectives couldn't ignore the tension that had clearly been brewing in the household. Clara's feelings of inadequacy, combined with her dependence on Matthew and her resentment toward Ava, painted a picture of a woman on the edge. While Clara initially claimed she had no part in Ava's death, detectives began to suspect that her jealousy may have played a much larger role than she was letting on. Lucas Doyle, 17, was Ava Simmons' ex-boyfriend and had a reputation for being a talented athlete with a short temper. He and Ava had dated for over a year, and during that time Lucas had shown signs of jealousy and possessiveness traits that grew worse toward the end of their relationship. By March of 2017, their relationship had become strained, and Ava eventually broke things off. According to friends, Lucas took the breakup hard, struggling to accept that Ava wanted to move on with her life. In the days leading up to Ava's death, witnesses reported seeing Lucas and Ava arguing in public several times. One of these arguments took place at a local mall, where they had both run into each other near a Starbucks. Tensions flared when Ava mentioned her plans to leave Clearwater and start fresh. Lucas had always feared losing control over the people in his life, and Ava's decision to move on without him seemed to hit a nerve. He was known to have a strong competitive streak on the football field, and that drive to win seemed to extend to his personal relationships as well. When police brought Lucas in for questioning, he initially appeared calm, but distant, a stark contrast to the more emotional reactions of the other suspects. He explained that while he and Ava had broken up, they had remained on civil terms. However, investigators were quick to pick up on the inconsistencies in his story. He seemed evasive when asked about the nature of their arguments, and grew visibly uncomfortable when the subject of her leaving town came up. Detectives believed Lucas had a possible motive rooted in jealousy and rejection. He had been unable to control Ava during their relationship, and her desire to move on may have pushed him over the edge. While Lucas maintained his innocence throughout the interrogation, his body language and attitude suggested he wasn't telling the whole truth. His frustration over Ava's independence and future plans made him a person of interest, and police felt he could have lashed out in a moment of rage. Despite Lucas's efforts to distance himself from the situation, his connection to Ava, combined with his history of emotional volatility, kept him under close scrutiny. Investigators knew they had to keep digging to determine whether Lucas had played a role in her tragic death. The investigation took an unexpected turn in late March 2017, when police uncovered crucial new evidence that shed light on Ava Simmons' intentions leading up to her death. It was a bitterly cold morning, and a heavy snowfall from a late-season blizzard still blanketed the streets of Clearwater. Police had been combing through Ava's digital footprints, social media, texts, and email accounts when they discovered a series of messages exchanged between Ava and Lucas Doyle. The texts revealed something startling. Ava had been secretly planning to leave Clearwater and hitchhike to Arizona, where her grandparents had retired. In these messages, Ava confided in Lucas about her desire to escape the turmoil of her home life. She had been growing more fearful for her safety, expressing doubts about her ability to stay in her mother's house any longer. She felt trapped by the toxic environment, her mother's jealousy, Matthew's advances, and the suffocating drama that surrounded them. The messages painted a picture of a young woman desperate for a fresh start from the chaos that had taken over her life. The police immediately shifted their focus, realizing that Ava's plans to leave had likely escalated tensions at home. They suspected that Clara Simmons, Ava's mother, might have discovered her daughter's plan to escape and reacted violently. With Ava's close relationship with Matthew already a source of jealousy, learning that Ava was planning to abandon her may have pushed Clara over the edge. Investigators began to dig deeper into Clara's recent behavior and her whereabouts on the night of Ava's death. The discovery of these texts also raised new questions about Lucas Doyle. Had he been aware of the danger Ava was in? Was he somehow involved in her plan to leave or even her death? While Lucas's emotional volatility and past arguments with Ava had made him a suspect, The new evidence suggested that his role might be more complicated than police had initially thought. This new development provided a clearer motive for the crime and allowed investigators to start piecing together the events leading up to Ava's murder. It was now a race against time to determine who, out of the people closest to Ava, was capable of committing such a brutal act. As police pieced together the new evidence from Ava's digital messages and witness interviews, they zeroed in on Sara Simmons. The final breakthrough came when investigators uncovered that Sara had discovered not only Ava's plan to leave, but also her daughter's ongoing sexual relationship with Matthew Simmons, her husband, and Ava's stepfather. The combination of these two devastating blows triggered a violent, deadly outburst. Feeling abandoned and humiliated, Sara was overcome with jealousy. Already emotionally unstable and struggling with alcohol dependence, she saw Ava as a threat in more ways than one. She believed that Ava had stolen Matthew from her, as their relationship had crossed the line from flirtation into something much more serious. This betrayal, coupled with Ava's plans to escape their shared home, sent Sara into a fit of rage. Late on the night of March 26, 2017, after a confrontation that quickly escalated, Sara attacked Ava in their small Clearwater home. Fueled by anger and alcohol, Sara brutally beat her daughter, using anything she could find: her fists, household objects, and whatever else was nearby. The attack was savage, and Ava was left unconscious, unable to defend herself against her mother's uncontrollable fury. Realizing what she had done, Sara panicked. The blizzard outside was fierce, with heavy snow and frigid winds whipping through the streets of Clearwater. In a desperate attempt to cover up her crime, Sara dragged her daughter's limp body out into the cold. She hoped the severe weather conditions would conceal the brutal beating. Sara left Ava's unconscious, bruised body in the parking lot of a local school, hoping the snowstorm would erase any traces of her involvement. The police, piecing together the timeline and motive, now had a clear suspect. On April Fool's Day, Sara Simmons was arrested at the house she once shared with Ava. She showed little emotion during the arrest, and her demeanor suggested she had long since resigned herself to the consequences of her actions. When confronted with the evidence, Sara barely reacted, neither surprised nor remorseful. Ava's friends and family were left devastated by the arrest, struggling to comprehend the horrific truth that her mother had been the one responsible for her tragic death. By March of 2018, the trial of Sara Simmons for the murder of her daughter Ava had captivated Clearwater. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Monica Hayes, a 38-year-old known for her no-nonsense demeanor, argued that Sara had killed her daughter out of a toxic combination of jealousy, rage, and desperation. Hayes presented the evidence of Sara's violent outburst after learning about Ava's relationship with Matthew Simmons and her plan to leave home. The prosecution painted a picture of a woman driven to madness by feelings of abandonment and betrayal, lashing out in the most brutal way possible. Hayes emphasized the brutal nature of the attack, the lengths Sara went to in staging the crime scene, and how she had left her daughter to die in the harsh cold, hoping the blizzard would hide the true cause of death. The defense, led by attorney Scott Lansing, a 45-year-old with a reputation for taking on difficult cases, tried to argue that Sara had not intended to kill her daughter. Lansing claimed that Sara had been overwhelmed by years of emotional and financial strain, made worse by her alcohol dependency and the toxic relationship with Matthew. Lansing's defense strategy focused on portraying Sara as a victim of her circumstances, a woman pushed to the brink by years of neglect and abuse, both from Matthew and from life in general. He argued that Ava's death was a tragic accident, not premeditated murder. The trial was emotionally charged, with Ava's friends and family filling the courtroom. Her classmates from high school, former co-workers from Walmart, and even neighbors came to watch the proceedings. Ava's remaining family members were devastated, visibly shaken throughout the trial, especially as they heard the graphic details of her final moments. After several days of deliberation, the jury found Sara guilty of second-degree murder. The sentence was 25 years to life in prison, a verdict that left many feeling conflicted. Some thought the punishment was too light given the brutal nature of the crime, while others believed it was fair considering Sara's mental state at the time. For Ava's family and friends, though, no sentence could bring her back, leaving them to grapple with a loss that would affect them for years to come. After the trial concluded in March 2018, Sara Simmons was sent to prison to serve her sentence of 25 years to life for the murder of her daughter Ava. The prison she was assigned to, Minnesota Correctional Facility Shakopee, is known for housing female inmates and offers various programs aimed at rehabilitation. Clara struggled with her new reality, battling feelings of guilt and shame. Reports indicated that she had difficulty adjusting to prison life, often isolating herself from other inmates. Clara's struggles with alcoholism continued, and she participated in substance abuse programs in an attempt to cope with the demons that had haunted her for years. Meanwhile, Matthew Simmons, who had been Ava's stepfather and played a complicated role in this tragic story, faced his own consequences. After Ava's death, Matthew lost his job as a construction worker due to the public outrage surrounding the case and the scrutiny of his past behavior. He moved away from Clearwater to avoid the backlash from the community. However, local news reports revealed that he continued to struggle with maintaining stable employment. Friends noted that he felt guilty for being involved in the family's dysfunction, but often deflected responsibility. Matthew ultimately chose to lead a quiet life away from the media spotlight, grappling with the role he played in the events that led to Ava's tragic death. As for Lucas Doyle, Ava's ex-boyfriend, he also faced the repercussions of the fallout. After their breakup, Lucas was reportedly distraught and became the subject of rumors and speculation in their school and community. Struggling with feelings of jealousy and loss, Lucas found it hard to cope. He graduated from high school in June 2018, but struggled to find direction afterward. He moved to a neighboring town to start fresh, but the memories of Ava and their tumultuous relationship weighed heavily on him. Friends indicated that he often reflected on his past actions and the tragic outcome of the situation, seeking therapy to address his feelings of guilt and regret. For the community of Clearwater, the impact of Ava's murder remained palpable. Many residents attended memorial events in her honor and participated in discussions about domestic violence, mental health, and the importance of community support systems. Though Ava's story ended tragically, her memory inspired some to advocate for change, ensuring that her life and the circumstances surrounding her death would not be forgotten. The tragic murder of Ava Simmons is a reminder that even the closest relationships can turn deadly when jealousy, anger, and fear take over. Though justice was served, the pain left behind for her family and friends will last a lifetime. Thank you for listening to this episode of Silent Crime Case. Join us next time as we uncover more shocking cases that continue to puzzle and disturb. Stay safe, everyone. Hey, unsolved crime solvers. Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Stay safe, unsolved crime solvers.